This note is $100 billion. And in November, one of my associates came into the office and said, "Here, have this." And it was a $100 billion note from Zimbabwe. And I went, "Isn't this great? I've become a billionaire, a centibillionaire." So, and then I got reading the note, and in fine print below how much money it was, it said that it expires on December 31st of last year. And I thought, well, that's short-lived. So that note was discontinued, it had expired, and then in January, late January, Zimbabwe issued new notes, and that was 100 trillion, was the largest of that denomination. And they went out and issued these, and it was worth about $33 US when it was issued. About a month and a half later, they stopped circulation of it, and they went to adopted a US dollar as the currency of the land, and in the process, they took everyone's bank account and just cut 12 zeros off their balance. Now, this is rather humorous if it were an isolated example, but one of the reasons why you want to consider owning gold if you don't already have gold is because this process of debasing the currency is happening all around the world right now. And all the problems that our economies are facing, the economies of the Western world in particular, are being addressed by politicians who believe that they can print any amount of money and that will solve all the problems. It's a very short-term stopgap measure, and the people that are hurt the most are the ones that shouldn't be hurt at all. They're the ones that are conservative and prudent and save and leave their money in the bank while our governments go out and print money to bail out organizations that shouldn't be bailed out, and in the end, it becomes like a Zimbabwe dollar. This has happened several times in the past, and if you're a student of history, you'd know that, but the Weimar Republic in the 1920s, after the Civil War in the US, sitting after the Continental War, War of Independence in the US, and there are a whole series of other periods of history where people in France in the 1790s, where the government went out and was seeing a downturn in the economy. They confiscated all the church lands, which represented 1/4 of the land in France, and they had a note called an assignat, or an assignment. And they said, well, we're going to issue notes that are equal to 1/4 the value of the church land. And they put it into the economy, and it got going. And then it started failing, so they had to print more. At the end of the 10-year period of the beginning of the 1800s, where you had the guillotine and storming of the Bastille and Napoleon, if you'd kept your money in the bank, you went from being very comfortable to almost being a pauper. And that's the irresponsibility of governments. So this is a bit of history. I have an assignat back in my office, and every once in a while you'll find a French chateau that someone was rummaging around in the attic, and they find a big chest, and it's just full of these from the 1790s. They had 2,400 presses going 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, trying to satisfy the demand right at the end of the 1790s. So, with that said, this is fun. Chance to be a billionaire. Do we have everybody's name? Almost. So if you bear with me for a moment, you'll walk out with a very light gait if you win one of these. So, I'd recommend, if people want to know what's happening, to do some reading of economic history. It doesn't always happen in exactly the same way, but there's a lot of very common elements. And there's a book Bernard Baruch had reprinted. It's called The Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. It's about 1,100 pages long, and Bernard Baruch was a legend on the New York Stock Exchange, and had made his fortune, made his first million in his early 20s and lost it promptly, and then remade it and served as economic advisor to 4 presidents of the United States, in addition to Texas Gulf Sulfur was one of his big plays. But he had this book reprinted. It was, the author, Charles McKay, wrote it in 1842, and it documented the manias that swept through through Europe, Western Europe in particular, and North America after it was established. And it's uncanny how these manias come, like the tech bubble, or tulips, or land plays. They happen, and in the preface of the book, it said that neither education nor wealth was sufficient protection from the madness of the crowds. We all get swept up in the moment, and it's very difficult to fight it and be a contrarian. But if you want to survive in this market, you need to be. And we're in volatile terms. How's our bag full of names? Here it is. All right. Well, Alan, you've got the longest reach. So stir it up.
Okay.
Did you check that, Bonnie, to make sure it was legal? Steve Tang is our newest billionaire. Steve would come up here. Trillionaire, I should say.